right, thank you everyone for joining tonight's meeting. I'll use out there in Zoom. We were having a little Zoom difficulties, but it looks like we've got it figured out now. So we're gonna go ahead and call tonight's meeting to order. I'm gonna start with our roll call and we'll begin with Janet Hall.
Present.
Denny.
Present.
Ron.
Present.
Is Tony out there anywhere? I don't think so, is he? Is Tony on the Zoom? No? So myself, Tim Kirsch, so we do have a quorum with the four of us here. Emily is excused as she's on vacation. So we'll move into conflicts of interest. If anybody here has any conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest on tonight's agenda, state for the record. Nothing at this time, but something shows up later in the meeting, please be sure and speak up at that time. Announcements. Does anybody have any announcements that they would like to make? Okay. Public comments. Anybody out there in Zoom, public comment? Old business had consent agenda and approval of the July 1st board meeting, but we're gonna hold that off until our next meeting in September. So we're gonna move right into new business. And that first thing on new business is resetting our September meeting. It was scheduled for September 2nd, however, that is a holiday. So, we need to find a new meeting date for our first meeting in September. I am out of town the second week of September. So, I don't know what works for folks. When's Gates' city council meetings?
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays or Thursdays? There's Thursdays and Detroit's.
Detroit's second Tuesday.
Second Tuesday? So could we potentially do Tuesday, the 3rd of September? Does that work for folks? Or Tuesday, the 3rd of September? Does that seem to work then? So everybody's pretty much in consensus that September the 3rd. Moving on to the treasurer's report. Mr. Evans.
The month of July, we received 2 invoices, one from the dog for $2,000, and then we got the CIS policy renewed finally. No confusion on that, but we got it all fine. For our insurance policy, we had one order of business, that's Emily's trip. I would like to make a motion that we consider that a business trip, as far as the SSA is concerned, and in that sense, we would reimburse her for as a normal business trip with miscellaneous travel, lodging, food, and miscellaneous as a normal business trip would.
For those that don't know what the business trip is about, is we were invited to attend a symposium in the Netherlands and view some sewer treatment facilities there. And there was a scholarship available, and I believe Emily was awarded one of those scholarships, but however, it does not cover her travel expenses there. So
It goes around Denmark, actually, and it shows all of the latest technology and what they have and available in Denmark. We different snow and sewage is treated, future things. It's what's coming in the future. A lot of information that might be useful in the second quarter of us.
Silly question. Oh, sorry. Silly question. What does the scholarship cover then?
Just the access to the symposium, where they get the people together and take them to these different facilities. And during that time, it covers their food and lodging while they're on this trip around with these facilities. but the travel is not covered.
Okay.
And that's what I said, if we consider it's a business trip, then we can reimburse her for travel expenses. I think that's appropriate.
What's the total cost?
The cost of that in country was $5,800, which they're paying for her. Getting there and her support stuff is not covered.
So do we know how much the airfare is gonna be?
She's got a quote for 1,300.
Round trip one way.
That's round trip.
Oh, that's pretty good.
It is, yeah.
Can't get to and from Texas for that.
There's some days it's not covered on her, hotel, there's most of her food covered and some isn't, but, and I would recommend, having lived on expenses most of my life, I would expect to say that per diem is probably a $50 a day per diem or something to cover miscellaneous charges would be appropriate.
Do we have to follow the GSA travel? So that was said.
That's the IRS publishes it.
GSA, it changes, so I know I can get to it at the office. I can,
If you look at
You-
Denmark on the State Department, their per diem rate is $390 a day.
Well-
That's,
but if she's traveling as a public representative or public employee, you have to follow that law.
that's a maximum. And that includes food and lodging, and a lot of our food and miscellaneous.
Yeah,
So a lot of the food is, so I'm thinking it's just on covering the miscellaneous portion of that, I'd say a per diem rate of around $50 a day. And
I
then
don't think-
reimburse
yeah.
any food expenses.
But what I'm saying though is I don't think we can make it lower.
Yeah, you can, that's a maximum. That's
That's the maximum that they can spend out, but I don't think we can put a lower number on that.
Yeah,
I don't think GSA will let us do that.
well, up to GSA, might be with the State Department.
State goes by,
The State Department specific set a maximum rate of, and
yeah,
that's
and
what-
it says that, but we can't make it smaller. They can spend up to that amount.
Right.
They get
But that's
reimbursed.
what you're saying, yeah,
Right.
but because the reason I'm saying it would be less, that number accounts for housing and food and miscellaneous.
Right.
Yes,
So most of our housing and food is paid for. And it doesn't cover miscellaneous, so we would receive any housing that's not paid for on a receipted basis. But you're right, up to, yeah,
Okay.
we wouldn't exceed, not to
I used to
exceed.
do travel.
Do we have a suggested not to exceed number?
$395,
Oh.
not to exceed the State Department requirement.
What was the number again that you're suggesting?
I would suggest that we reimburse any travel and hotel expenses that aren't covered by this. And I give her a $50 per diem a day for miscellaneous charges along the way.
Okay, I'm pulling up the site right now.
So the State Department rate for Denmark is a maximum of $394 a day, which is,
Well, if I may make
Yeah,
a
please.
comment or an observation, I think it's great that people are interested in doing this, and to take the time to do that and, basically be provided with a junket to a country, that maybe they hadn't been to before, so it can turn out to be a dual purpose. My question and concern is that all of the information that one person could derive from a trip like this is available in about 10 seconds on the internet. And it's available in great detail through the State Department or who can get to the information at a local level that would be applicable to anything that we might want to do or could do in the four canyon cities. So I'm just not sure that our dollars that we have to spend are being supported very well by sending a volunteer off to a foreign country to gather information that's readily available by many other sources.
the other side is that you have to know what to look for in that.
I
So she can
Well,
find,
then we should have sent an engineer.
we didn't have time. We
Well,
could,
I think.
we applied for it, she was selected.
We had some discussion of this before too, and Emily noted when she was applying for it that most all the other applicants were engineers. So was she actually even qualified? And the scholarship was provided through Business Oregon. And I think the answer that she received was that they want policymakers there as well. And they don't want to be just inundated with engineers.
So can someone articulate for me exactly how NSSA will benefit from this?
That's a great question, and I think it needed to be asked, absolutely.
Look,
I'll ask
I
you.
think Emily's a wonderful person. I enjoy getting to know her. This has nothing to do, I'm talking about tax dollars. I don't care whether it's Business Oregon or any other
Right,
state agency. Those are tax dollars that are precious. And I can tell you this, most of us travel a lot on to be involved on this board and other activities in the canyon cities. And there's nothing to support that. Well, you know, most of us are blessed that we just don't need that. But the fact is, what if somebody's out there that isn't blessed and could be volunteering their time locally? There's nothing to support that.
Yeah.
Maybe we could look at that too. If we could identify things as business oriented, we could support it. That's maybe something we should have been doing all along.
I don't know.
When you drive someplace, we should be reimbursing you for your mileage. We're reimbursing her.
that's
We
once
should,
you,
we
once
should
you,
have been
Yeah, but
reimbursing.
that's staff. And, you know, when we get on these things, we know it's a volunteer
right,
program. I mean, there was no question in my mind. And, I do that and a lot of other volunteer things that I think benefit me as a person. I don't know how much it benefits the organizations.
The other comment I'll make really quick, having been involved in travel for the federal government, is the appearance of, not gonna say impropriety is the wrong word, but the appearance of travel like this, if there's, you know, if it doesn't,
extravagance.
yeah, the extravagance.
That's
Even
why I
sending
use the
somebody
term
to-
junket.
Yeah, but even sending somebody, we sent guys to Australia for those big fires they had, what, in the mid-90s. And we got help for that. And I mean, they went over there to fight fire and teach fire. But just the appearance and, I would be, especially with the way our community is, with people looking at that. I mean, I'm not trying to shoot it, but I think it's a great idea. But having been on that end of the stick.
And unfortunately, as far as the value, we won't know that until she comes back, and gives us a report. And we can evaluate what she finds out, if it's useful or not.
Well, I don't wanna put anybody on the spot. I mean, I think she should report, but I don't think a decision should be contingent upon what we all think about a report. If we're gonna do it, we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And anytime I've ever taken a trip for the companies that I worked for 40 years, I bloody well had a mandate that I would provide extensive notes and attention to conferences with the information that I gathered.
I was in a better situation in that my presence was good enough. And I got all over the world, I get to fly in business class. And, you know, this might be, but it was
Well,
so
I would say,
different situation.
just to throw it out there too, I'm not advocating for or against, but one of the values of sending someone to this is somewhat giving them a personal energizing towards the
I
whole
agree.
thing.
I agree.
So that's, I know that on my business trips and stuff too, getting out of the office and going seeing stuff out in the field makes a big difference.
The,
So.
the question is, she's going to go, the question we have is whether she pays all that herself or we reimburse it for it, that's the question.
What was her expectation when she did it, whether she?
Did she
gonna
pay for
it?
herself? She had no idea at all until I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, it's a business trip, we should reimburse that, we should. She had no idea, she totally expected to pay it all herself.
Okay,
So if we want to, fine, if we don't, fine. So, but,
How many days is the trip?
it's just a little over a week, I think it's like 10 days.
Do we know how many of those days that she will be in lodging?
Probably, well, all but probably getting there and coming back, so all but probably 2. Well, that might be covered too. The big one's a plane trip and some local transportation issues, some off time that they have, which they gotta provide, they gotta support themselves on a couple of the days. That would be huge. My experience travel like that, it adds up really, really quick.
So just frames. The top side of the per diem is $419. Depending on the date, the location and all that stuff. So even figuring 3 days. At that per diem rate, now as she makes it into the States and she stays in a motel here in, the States somewhere in DC, all of that changes, it would be. Probably a lot lower, but just looking at 3 days at their rate, that's $1,200, so we'd be looking at minimum $1,500.
$1,300 ticket.
No, that's it, that's with the ticket.
Hmm.
No, what did I say? I was
Oh,
wrong.
yeah.
No, 2,500. Geez, Janet, mind your budget, guys. So $2,500.
Yeah, it would probably be less than that, but that would be a maximum,
But
not to
that's-
exceed amount.
That would be a maximum plane layover, something happening, cancellation. I mean, don't fly Delta, it'd be better, but I don't know,
I totally understand Denny's comments on it. Is this a necessary expense? Is it an expense that, or is it an extravagance expense? Although I think it's a great learning opportunity, I don't know that it's a necessary expense either, so.
You
I don't
have,
know.
I don't wanna put, Arthur on the spot, but, I'm going to.
Is Arthur out there?
He's out there, and, Arthur with Business Oregon.
oh,
Business organ.
Hey guys, bear with me just a second. Yep, yeah. Me,
In, response to, that might be useful to the board, for Denny's.
yeah, we've organized at least one other recent trip to this plant in Denmark. I haven't been closely involved with the effort other than I knew there was a scholarship available and reached out to Laura to see if she might know somebody on the board who wanted to go. I'm glad we got to take her. I know that the last trip that went was very enthusiastic about it. Representative Elmer was one of the attendees there. I can get you a list of some others if you want to talk to anybody that went about what they learned and what they learned, or what they learned on that excursion. I'm not really going to say much about this particular trip, except I will speak up in favor of, business travel. There's a lot you can learn online. I agree with Denny about that. But sometimes you don't know what questions to ask until you get there and you see the thing. And whether this particular sewer plant in the Netherlands, and it's got some connection to local industrial efforts, and I think that's why we're interested in it. But whether that's analogous to the North Santiam sewer, I don't know. But I do know that going in person sometimes gives you a feel for things that you can't get even over Zoom and the similar types of communications we have today. Yeah, I can't say a whole lot more about the opportunity than that. I have to confess some ignorance here.
Thank you, Arthur. We appreciate your input for sure.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
I noticed the balance on the treasury report. there's like
Mary has her hand raised as well.
49,
Yeah, we still have that.
yeah, so. Do we have any guarantees we have additional money coming? To support. The NSSAs, and I know that there's been promises and so forth, but. That would be, another concern, but we got 2.5 years left to go to build out the door. I mean, it's only $2,500, but I couldn't do it.
What they're saying, I would assume that if they're going to buy that piece of property, that they're going to give us the money.
Well, that's a whole different bucket of money, I
Yeah,
believe, is
that's-
buying the property.
That's
So I'm thinking that we're going actually to be talking with Marion County tomorrow about the budget that we're presenting to them for our NISA operations. So,
But working for the state, and I'm sure the county's the same, it's not over until the fat lady has that little check in her hands, and it's deposited.
well,
Very hard.
And it actually
Yes.
takes a little while after the positive. For it to really
Oh,
use it.
Mary, you got a comment for us, please?
Yeah, I just was wondering, not that I do agree with Arthur going to a place to see, another treatment system. But there's already been an investment in, doing the rapid infiltration and all that. So I'm just curious as to, by sending her there or him, I don't know who's going, is that not for this project, the Mill City Gates, but it's maybe looking at Detroit. And I didn't understand, why send somebody when we're already going down this pathway and have selected basically what they think the treatment thing was going to be. So I'm just curious as to, are you hoping that you could switch gears and that's cheaper, or what would be the purpose of this trip?
We don't really know what she's going to find out. No, the situation is she's going, and the only question is, we're gonna support her trip going there, or whether they're gonna let her do it on her own.
Yeah, and I understand Mary's question too. How does it pertain specifically to the project, since we do have a pathway and these guys have done so much great work?
And we have
Yes,
a tight time frame too. It's not like we can say, oh, okay, let's take a year and rethink, right? Because
Right. Okay, well. In the spirit of moving forward with the meeting, the things that I'm seeing is, yes, I don't see it actually benefiting us. I see it as a personal benefit to Emily, and I would encourage her to go. She has the resources obviously to do it, but I don't know that the sewer authority should be spending the money. So, I guess that's just where I'm at. And I don't know if we need some sort of vote, yay or nay, consensus, motions, whatever.
I make a motion to support her, and I vote to do that. One vote.
We've have a motion to go ahead and do it. Do we have a second for that motion? Motion dies for lack of a second.
There's just been. Denny and Mary just brought up some things that I hadn't thought about.
It is, it's a tough decision because we do want to support Emily and I think that it is a wonderful opportunity. I know that I could have applied for this myself, but I didn't have it in my schedule to do it. But, I appreciate everybody's honest feelings on this and that they're very important. So thank you, everyone. I think we're gonna say though then that we would like to wish Emily success in going to this, but however, I don't see us spending $2,500. Right. Okay. So with that, is there anything else we need to do on the treasurer's report?
Nope.
Then we'll move on to our staff report.
Well, good evening. The first thing that I want to discuss with you, didn't make it into the staff report, but the administrative services staff have reminded me of this a couple of times, so it's getting its own, its own letter in here. The NSSA, as we know, records its meetings and then places those meetings in its Google Share Drive and then posts them to YouTube. You are at your storage capacity for your free Google account. And what will start to happen is that you will not be able to access your other shared documents, your legal documents, your foundational documents, unless you either buy storage at $10 a month or you move those video files to a different form of archive storage. So your choices are that you could instruct staff to put those videos on a thumb drive and someone can keep the thumb drive. Because we don't keep your permanent record. COG does not. Or you can buy more storage at $10 a month. And it's time to start thinking about that decision. If you're ready to make that decision tonight, we can talk about that more, or we can probably hold off until September 2nd. Third, yes. If you're looking for staff recommendation, I would tell you to put it on a thumb drive and then pick somebody to hang on to it for you as your permanent archive.
That would be,
We'll bring it back here and put it in the tray.
I would have to get the council's approval.
Having a keychain full of thumb drives is hardly an opportunity for universal access at any time.
We have a couple of sets of them.
So the access for the community, for the public, is the YouTube channel, which you are not out of storage on.
Okay.
What we're talking about, what I'm speaking to is your requirement to keep a record, your records.
And nobody ever accesses those anyway, right?
Well, if they do request that, then we go pull that information. And if it's not on YouTube for some reason, if you were to get a public records request, we would probably pull it off of YouTube and say it's right here. Or if they ask for the file itself, then we would go pull it off of your thumb drive. Or you can buy more storage.
Well, if we could get a couple of thumb drives, we could pick a couple of different places to store it in safes, and then we'll have more capable access. And I'm the secretary, so I guess one of them would be in my safe at home.
Which wherever else you can also keep your originals, so your original IGAs and such. So,
I don't think we have those.
okay,
I think those were all with Danielle and.
okay.
Right.
Yeah,
To me, it's modest. Right, so $10 a month on Google, or we invest. I don't know what a thumb drive even costs anymore, but they're not very expensive, but Google is. We do have problems with our Zoom and stuff too, obviously, so you never know.
I say thumb drives, because they're given for a terabyte thumb drive, it's almost. They're down almost nothing. But those thumb drives don't last. Like the old floppies.
I think if
So
it's,
bad.
They
I
don't
think if
last.
it's important material, we ought to spend the $10 a month. Even though I know Google only made $24.5 billion last quarter. Oh,
We can do a thumb drive too and have that as backup. I
We
mean,
might as well help support them when they retire. So.
Tangential to that, I need to research, and I will come back in September, research what the archive requirement is for your records. You may have adopted an archive policy when you adopted your other founding policies. Public agencies are not required to keep records indefinitely unless it's a certain type of record. For example, financial records, 7 years unless it's a certain type of record. So I need to go back to your founding materials and see if there's a policy there.
If the thumb drives are really cheap, then I don't know why we couldn't actually do both and just put a thumb drive in a safe somewhere, but have the Google backup as something that would probably be easier access for a lot of people. So
and maybe twice a year go through and
Right,
take the, other 6 months, take the longest 6 months off and just.
And by people, only certain people have access to view that Google Drive, the board members, but the general public does not. They would have to do a public records request.
right,
So they do have access though, of course, to the recordings and the agendas and the minutes.
so I would say,
Can we get the Google Drive on a yearly basis?
I don't know. We can look into that.
Probably.
Or will you do that and bill us, or is that how that would work?
Do you want to talk about that offline? Figure out if you want to take care of it or if we'll take care of that
It's
for you.
not a year, we could do it, I could do it, but,
Okay.
you know, monthly, that would be onerous.
okay,
We'll bring our recommendation back. We'll bring a solution back in September.
Mhm.
Okay. On the same note, our administrative services team has asked if they can spend a little time, housekeeping in that Google Drive. Organizing it in a certain way, and, I have asked them to create a, proposal for what that looks like and to bring it back to this group. But they have been, over the years, a year or so between Silas and then just various administrative staff noticing that it's a little disorganized and that board members sometimes have trouble finding what they're looking for. And so our administrative services coordinator had offered to present an organization proposal to you. And so we'll bring that to you in September.
okay,
All right, other staff report. So, staff, was not focusing on budget this month in July. We were primarily, focused on developing and implementing, communications toolkit, with MIG, which is, Keller's and the Marion County's communications contractor, to inform interested parties about the need for the 3-basin rule update. So those materials included an FAQ, letters and resolutions of support that cities and other interested parties could be using. I think that they created a PowerPoint for Marion County Public Works to use as they go out, cover memo and the actual petition language. COG requested a list of interested parties from the DEQ, knowing that NSSA feels strongly that we have robust community engagement in these topics. And so we felt strongly that we wanted to know who DEQ thought we should be talking to about these things. And Mary was gracious enough to provide that to us. We also coordinated with Marion County to speak with City of Salem and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde about these updates. And I will back up and say, as you know, from previous staff reports, the County Public Works team had been meeting with the Salem Public Works team for many weeks now to understand the intricacies of any update that you would need. So the county and COG are continuing to schedule staff level meetings with other wastewater utilities and downstream drinkers and interested parties. And we'll continue to do that. And Chris is probably going to update you a little bit more about 3-basin rule efforts during his part. Let's see. I think I will also, although I did include in my staff report, as of Friday, an understanding of the timing that the county is going to be pursuing a petition to the 3-basin rule next week. And when that happens next week, in September, we will have a resolution prepared for this board, a resolution in support of that. So that you can, when they petition for it, you can have a resolution and a letter of support and provide comment on that in support of that 3-basin rule update. So we didn't have that prepared for you this week. Some things shifted and sped up, I will say. We didn't think that we were going to be doing that until, or that was going to be happening until a little bit later this year, or even early next year. And there was just reason to speed that up and file it next week instead, which Chris will go into, I think. Simultaneously, conversations, and I think Denny and I had a brief conversation about this, have restarted about a bill for the 2025 session. that would create statutory authority for a three-basin rule if that was needed in light of the Supreme Court Chevron cases. So we've had a couple cases come out of the Supreme Court that are changing our strategies and changing the county strategies. So just be aware of that. I think I'll defer to the county on the funding updates. They've been having some good funding conversations. And then lastly, I thought I would include some information about not the commercial septic grants, because COG isn't active with the commercial septic grants, but with the residential septic grants. So as you may recall, both COG and the county have a residential septic grant program. Our septic grant program is funded through DEQ. It is based, it has income requirements that go with it. The county's funding is through Business Oregon. It's all ARPA funding, but it's through Business Oregon. They do not have income restrictions. And so early on when the grants were awarded, the county and COG got together and created one application so that eligible property owners only had to submit one application instead of two applications. And then the county staff and the COG staff work together to figure out who qualifies for which grant. And often they qualify for both. 121 grants have been awarded total. What is in front of you is just what COG has awarded. We can get the information for how much county has awarded. But the COG has awarded $626,000 out of the DEQ funds. And then I broke out the grants by city. So 15 in Gates, 56 in Detroit, 49 in Lyons, 1 in Mill City, although I know I have a couple more that are in process, for a total of 121 for residential septic grants for COG. And I know that Marion County, because they don't have that limit, that income restriction, has awarded much more than 626,000. So, but our program is capped. So if you make above a certain amount of income, the most you can qualify for is $2,000 under the COGS grant. But you can, if you had a $30,000 system, for example, and you made more than $80,000 in 2021, under COG, you would only be eligible for 2,000, but you would be eligible potentially for the rest of that, the 28,000 from Marion County. So we are covering people as much as possible and working closely with the Santiam folks and the disaster case managers there to help. Questions on what staff's been up to in July? And we will be attending on behalf of NSSA the meeting tomorrow night between Marion County and Mill City and Gates. Yes, with the funding proposal.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. Chris, I think it turns it over to you on the agenda or update from the county.
Sure.
Right, I think that if there are any questions from you folks on Zoom, I'll be turning my head this way, look at the screen. But yeah, I can hear you there. Yeah, so county's update for the summer. And one of these really rare cases where we're coming in, we want to acknowledge to address the problems being faced, but we're also coming in with a really big solution that's been in the works for the past year. And that's the 3-basin rule update that Laura's alluding to. So I wanted to talk through first other updates on what we're doing on the upper and lower basin. But then I will be talking more about the petition. And that was, the petition itself was distributed with these notes. So you should have that. So first off, a quick update on the Mill City gate system. We've been doing more field testing. It's pretty important field testing that we're doing. What we're doing is a real life simulation of the effluent discharge. So those rapid infiltration basins, we sort of have a miniature version constructed on the site. And we've been testing that by basically infiltrating tap water into the aquifer and measuring the response of the groundwater. So what we're starting to see, but it's going to take us a couple months to get all the data, is we're going to see kind of a wave as that pressure makes its way down to the river. And that'll take place over the next couple months. So it's like a very short pulse that will simulate how that facility will discharge its wastewater in the future. And so this helps us to really dial in that time of travel, which is so important to this question of functional equivalence that you've heard us bring up. It also makes sure that we can reliably sustain that discharge, because the last thing we want to do is to be in a situation where it's just not infiltrating fast enough, and a facility could be in trouble if they can't get rid of their effluent. So both very critical parameters. We already did a lot of this modeling by doing soil testing and doing it in a computerized model, but this is like a real world example that we can't characterize that much soil over half a mile. So it's this is part of that final testing that we're doing to make sure it's viable. So that's probably our most critical update, is that that's been carried out now that we have full access to the site. We're very grateful to the property owners for their cooperation. And we will start to get our initial data next week when the test completes. But then that data will continue to come in over the next couple of months because we have monitoring wells set up out there. We'll also be doing the first of a series of drone flights, so that we'll actually have like a nice aerial photography video of the progress of the project. Yeah, next topic I want to bring up is for the upper basins of the Detroit Idon area, specifically Detroit with its commercial setting. So we have the residential grant program, which is a simple reimbursement setup. We also have the commercial septic grant program. In many ways, it's the same fundamental structure. People incur costs and we reimburse them. But because commercial systems are more complex, when we created this program, we added in additional resources, knowing that the reimbursement is tied to the permit. So when a property owner actually completes their permit, they can't really form a grant agreement and get the check until the permit is done and the work is completed. We knew that there would be resources that would be needed, so we went ahead and created those resources to be at the property owner's disposal if they wish. That includes professional services for field exploration and professional services for permitting, along with waiver permit fees. So we hired a consultant, although he is acting as the property owner's consultant, we just pay the bills. And so that's what he's been working on with those properties for the better part of last year, really. People can still use their own consultant if they wish, same with the field exploration, anything else. So far, most people have chosen to use our consultant. So as he's been working on those, and as we've been trying to help shepherd those commercial properties through the permitting process in Detroit. They are very small lots. This is just throughout Detroit, all those lots are much smaller than is typical of a septic system, as you know, Gates experiences as well, Idana and Mill City did before the system. For residential properties, the county can permit them. And there's also provision that allows us to permit certain types of commercial properties where their waste is like residential. So an office building, a sandwich shop that uses paper plates, anything where the waste stream is very much like a residential, we can apply the same permitting rules. But where we cannot do that is what's called high strength waste. So anything, and there's actually specific parameters, you could send out a lab sample and measure them. But usually these high strength waste is anything that puts in a lot of sugars or a lot of greases and fats into the wastewater. So any type of commercial kitchen, food prep, fast food, bars, coffee stands, bakeries, food trucks, laundromats. It's not necessarily about the size as it is about the concentration of sugars and food, because those can act as food for bacteria. So those rules, the county has no permitting authority on those. There's no AR that says that anything where if there is a simple grease trap, that's something, if it's a simple grease trap turns it into residential strength, we can permit. Otherwise, it is strictly permitted under the DEQ through its WPCF permit. The catch and the real difficulty is that there are no provisions under WPCF for what is called a reasonable repair. For the county's process for residential and similar, there's kind of a repair process. But it's not under WPC, it's not there under WPCF as our consultant put it to me. You won't really find it codified in the rules. The catch is, it has been on a case-by-case basis. And so that consultant met with the DEQ and was trying to find a way for some of these really difficult, very challenging properties in Detroit to do a repair to prior conditions. And at this point, they said they cannot do that until they receive a permit application. So that's kind of where we're stuck and where it's creating difficulties. But I wanted to make sure that this board in its role was aware of that right now, we're kind of at a standstill until we get a WPCF application reviewed and submitted for those. But those are extremely constrained lots, so it is very much a challenge.
So this is the new mandate from DEQ in terms of changing the permitting process from what it was prior to 3 weeks ago when we received the note from Brannon that things were evolving in a very negative way. And, you know, maybe Mary can respond to this, but those of us who are affected, because you said we're kind of at a standstill, no, we're at a dead stop. Because of this change in permitting regulations to the WPCF regs, period. And that totally ignores the promises that came from the state of Oregon and the county of Marion about being able to build like for like in the business district post-fire. And no one has come forward to answer the why. These new regulations are not new regulations. They've actually been there for decades and they've been ignored. And now suddenly, and no one can tell us why, these regulations are now being brought to the forefront and managed in a very strict fashion. And perhaps there's good rationale for that, but no one from the agencies involved has bothered to communicate freely, either with the governor's office, because we've been in contact there, or with the county commissioners, and I can tell you, we've been in contact there as well, to let us know why.
So I think there are two important questions
Well,
that I think I should try to answer, at least one of them as best I can. There's a question of the regulation, and then there's the communication surrounding that. And you bring two great points on both of those. You know, one is, what is this regulation? Has it changed? Has it not changed? And that's where, as we understand this regulation's on the books, but that consultant note with DEQ is specifically for that purpose. The other aspect is the communication, where absolutely we could have done better, try to foresee this, try to craft a strategy around this. This is one case where, although we are not delivering the system on behalf of the property owners, we are just the grant program. We have tried to communicate as best we understood, and this is a tough one to navigate. And the information exchange, we hear you, we'll try to work on this better, because it is a critical aspect of that, is what is being communicated to these property owners? What is their pathway forward? I think that's where I wanted to make sure I came in today and address that this is what we've communicated so far, but this is where we want to step back and ask, what can we do better right now? And then what is our long-term solution? And I want to make sure I take every opportunity to work through those, because this is tough and this is very difficult right now for those property owners, and we want to make it better.
well, it's more than difficult. It's devastating, and we need to use the right language to describe what's going on. You're accepting responsibility, which I don't think you should have to do, for things that have been mandated by state regulators, not county. And you guys have done a tremendous job all along, and we have appreciated working with you. We've appreciated the engineering expertise that you brought to bear, especially with Brandon, been terrific. And now all of that has been brought to a halt. And it's not because of efforts from the county. That has nothing to do with it. You guys have been superb in your direction and your efforts and your execution of the various components that are required to make all of these things happen, including the testing, which you just mentioned. So, I would like to have the people who made these changes express clearly, publicly, what precipitated these changes? Because if they were ignored for decades, why suddenly, nearly 4 years into the post-fire recovery efforts of our business district in Detroit, were we brought to a sudden halt?
Well, I think one thing that I think I should make clear on is that this has been an administrative role in the books for quite a while. I may not have been aware of that as I crafted my own strategy, but it was brought to my attention, this has been the case. So in that regard, I do want to be clear that it's not a new rule. I just want to make sure that it's.
Well, I know it's not a new
Yeah,
rule.
you said that as well.
But I'm pretty sure Brannon was just as surprised as we were at the memo that he sent us appraising us of what had gone on in terms of the changes to the WPCF rules. So look, this isn't about pointing fingers, assigning guilt or blame or anything else. This is about promises that have been made to people who own property and have development aspirations in the city of Detroit, who are now held hostage by a bunch of rules that have been ignored for 50 years. Now, that's not my number. That's a number that came from someone at your organization at the county.
Well, so I think one thing we did do after this was brought up, because it is such an important issue, is we brought this to our board of commissioners as well. We've asked, to explore all options in terms of short-term and long-term fixes for this. So I will talk about the long-term fix in a moment when we talk about the 3 basin rule. One thing we did look into at Detroit's request was the possibility of utilizing some sort of holding tank strategy. We know it's not ideal. We know it is more expensive to operate in the short term. But as we understand it, these holding tanks are a short-term solution that effectively do not have any sort of discharge. They are pumped out and trucked elsewhere. So that is something that could be permitted in a short amount of time if DEQ approves of that. But there's likely to be some logistical challenges we'll have to surmount first. So it's one holding tank, 1,000 gallons, 1,500 gallons is not that big, but when you're talking about a large number of holding tanks throughout the city, we're talking a line of trucks kind of moving to get all of that moved, and a site that can actually accept and treat that waste.
What you're talking about is a system much like Kane's Marina on steroids.
Exactly. And so before we can charge ahead with that, we do want, if that is something that is palpable, I would say palpable, if that's something that's palpable to the property owners with all the operating costs involved, it's something that can be explored to see if that is viable. At this point, we don't know for sure whether the logistics of that could even work, but it is an option that appears to be allowable within the existing permit rules. So that could be a short-term fix. However, there's nothing to say for sure that a WPCF application would fail. It's just the repair process from DEQ has been on a case-by-case basis. That's where they could not commit to saying, yes, you can build that back the way it was. But for example, with a restaurant, as I understand it, the way the tables calculate out, a restaurant with 50 seats or below would be under 2,500 gallons. That means they wouldn't have to do a nitrogen groundwater study. It makes it feasible. It's still very difficult. We won't know for sure how big that system needs to be until we get the soil results. But the bottom line is, these septic rules and everything that's involved with the septic permitting was envisioned with much larger lots where septic systems can be big without having to worry about taking up all of the available space. So that's the challenge when we try to fit them on tiny lots. It just emphasizes, to me, more than almost any other challenges community spaces. These emphasize the importance of the sewer system in Detroit. I know that this is something that Detroit has faced before, but everything kind of brings us right back to that as the most viable long-term solution. But you're right, it is devastating, to use your words. And we're trying to explore every option we can to give them some short-term relief.
Well, and I know you're doing that, and I respect the work you've done. Chris, you've been so available to me and others in this, and it's very appreciated. The problem is, no one can even define the term you used a while ago. We know this will lengthen the process. What does that mean?
Well,
Nobody can put it in 3 months, 3 years.
the official WPCF review time is 3 to 6 months, but the DEQ has committed to trying to turn it around as fast as possible for wildfire impacted areas. That doesn't mean we can necessarily put a shorter time length in writing and guarantees, but they're committed to process them as fast as possible. That's what I've been told. They will get priority, so they may get through sooner. That said, because it is so challenging to develop a design, it's not something that we can turn around in a day either. So there is some work involved before that application is ready to submit. So
Has anybody even considered the concept of simply saying, look, we're committed to putting a municipal system in the Upper Canyon, and in the interim, we're gonna do the build like for like? And keep the promises that were made to the property owners in the business district of Detroit so that they can rebuild now, not 2 years from now. I mean, if you're sitting there with $1.5 to $2.5 million invested in property, architectural and engineering activities, and nobody can give you an idea of when you might get a permit. I mean, it's,
probably the best guarantee we could offer on that, again, and it still takes some work behind it. But the best certainty of permitting would be the holding tank. It's not ideal, but it is a good
and you
stop.
and I talked about that, yeah.
Yeah, so with that, it's just what the consultant has told the property owners, for those who are very constrained, is that frankly, he's concerned about whether or not a compliant system could fit.
Yeah.
And so they may not have a viable treatment solution until there's some other connection.
Right.
And again, with any kind of community system, anything that gets larger, right now, there's an unforeseen consequence of the three basin rule, which is that it seems it's a community system could be triggering the kind of type of permit that the three basin rule prohibits. So I'll talk about how that's a more of a long-term fix, but in the short term, we're just exploring all options to try to get them some relief in the meantime.
Thank you.
Is anybody actually worried about the hypocrisy that we're trying to protect the river that right now you can't drink out of, or you get your pet close to, or
Well,
eat a fish out of, or?
I'm glad you brought that up. I think, we've had a very collaborative conversations with the downstream users of this, who are also very concerned about the water quality. And they're in agreement that, at least, at our staff level, as we work with Public Works and those who have to run the water treatment plants, they've been very supportive of a change that will reflect modern technology and modern regulations, so that holding paramount the quality of the water. And I think really that's the key message, is that everything we're doing holds paramount the protection of the environment. We're trying to make it better, not worse.
Seems like if they have, their plant has to deal with a fairly high substantial level of kind of toxins that, a low level of influence should be taken care of in the process of that, you would think, and that it seems bizarre that we're stuck with going through hoops 4 years later, trying to get something done because of, and they're supporting the protected river that you can't drink out of right now. This,
Because the algae blooms.
Well, the algal blooms were in, last week, and I think they're still there today.
Yeah. River's still there.
And, City of Salem's, ozone treatment plant is, still working to remove those toxins. They have an open invitation to come to work, so if there is interest in that, they're always eager to show it off. But it's also important to see how important watershed protection is, because that's going on right now, and that's a serious burden on downstream users. And when anybody asks, why should we keep supporting these projects? Why should we put more money into these projects for small communities? Well, you're not just doing that. You're investing in small communities and the water supply of 250,000 people.
well, Gates, we've got a plan to take care of that, so. One of the few in the canyon that doesn't actually.
And then I must come up with the question of we're being so protected up here, they have Salem dumps. How much storage into the Willamette River on almost a
Well,
daily basis?
That's managing a river.
Yeah.
No, but it's just maybe in snarky.
Okay, you're good. We like your snarkiest. So that's probably a good point for us to segue into the long-term fix. And I want to emphasize, it's a long-term fix for the Mill City Gates undertaking, because that facility is going to require a discharge permit. But it's also a long-term fix for Detroit and Indiana as well. These communities are equally impacted. And so what we're doing is just as important for them as it is for Mill City Gates. And that's our petition to update the 3 basic rule. So I wanted to take today's meeting to just brief this body on it. Very short, and then to ask for your support on that, and then to understand the impact that it can have on your communities. So. I will.
They don't.
Short. Oh, they don't have, it wasn't attached? Oh. Okay, sorry, somehow I didn't get that actual petition attached, but we will make sure you have it. And then we'll also provide it so it can be hosted on the website. But in effect, the 3 basin rule as it stands now, I put a little quote here on it. It says, no NPDS permits shall be issued, or there's no new NPDS permits shall be issued for domestic sewage facilities. And that has been a challenge for all of our efforts since what the county is doing is delivering domestic sewage treatment facilities. Ordinarily, an NPDS permit has always applied to surface water discharges. But with the Supreme Court making a ruling in 2020, that can apply to groundwater discharges, and it may be something that the Mill City Gates facility needs to contend with. Again, data are still coming in. It is also very likely to be any of the solutions for Detroit. And again, any of those solutions, whether it's a city-wide system or if it's something smaller that is serving the downtown corridor only, anything that becomes a community's publicly owned treatment work solution has a high chance of running into a need for an NPDS permit. So we need the permit that is prohibited by the rule. Again, it's just an unforeseen consequence when they wrote this thing 30 years ago. So we're taking what we feel is the most responsible step for petitioning to change that rule so that this project and any subsequent project after that serving Detroit and Idaho could permit under NPDS effectively means compliance with the Clean Water Act. And it's a very, very important thing to comply with when you're talking about owning and operating a publicly owned sewer system. So this would effectively allow a project that can come in and just take these challenges that are being faced develop an engineering solution for it, permit it and build it. It allows us to take the Mill City Gates proposed plan and permit it without worrying about whether or not it's a functional equivalent of a direct discharge. That's what Peter Olson talked many moons ago about threading the needle with our data, trying to find it. Well, we don't control the data, we just measure them. And so until we have that certainty, we feel that this is the best pathway for the project. So we're going to be submitting that petition for rule change. It has 90 days before it goes before the EQC. And during that 90 days, we'll be asking NSSA to support us. We'll also be asking a lot of other communities to come to your support as well. I should say, come to our collective support, because we're in this together. So we'll be asking our downstream users, not just in the North Santiam, but also in the McKenzie and Clackamas basins, because they are potentially affected by our rule change as well. I think the key message behind all of this is that this is the best thing for the communities and the best thing for the environment. So we're not trying to completely overhaul the 3 basin rule. It's actually a very surgical update that just allows it to keep up with technology.
What's the best methodology to support your efforts?
Great question. We have, first of all, we provide a template letter, welcome to edit that, but any sort of resolution and letter by this body, as well as if your respective communities wish to participate, those can speak volumes. There will be a public comment process as part of rulemaking. So when that process comes along, I think DEQ may actually release that maybe 2 to 3 weeks after we submit the petition. Remarks in support of that petition would be very helpful. And then just public outreach and engagement, letting people in your communities know what's happening and why. So we'll be providing some press toolkit, a simple testimony, a simple Q&A about what we're doing and why. It's very important that people understand that we are not trying to remove environmental protection. In fact, we're trying to enhance it, but we're trying to enhance it in a way that makes your permitting viable. So it's a very logical, very light touch approach to the rule that creates a pathway for all your communities to have sewer systems. So any way that you can get that message out would be greatly appreciated. As Laura mentioned, we may also need to go before go on the floor of the legislature, and it's never too early to start getting ready. But we may also be going to the legislature asking for more money on projects. So there's no reason why we can't advocate for both.
Okay,
Yeah.
basically right now, we're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Because the 3 basin rule will put into place to protect the environment. A subsequent rule put into place gives us, so the path that we were able to follow to put in sewer systems now is obsolete. I mean, because we can't do the subsurface discharge now because of the mountain.
Well, it would still be subsurface discharge.
Well, yeah, I know, but because of the language, until we get that language changed, we're not allowed.
The whole point of the petition is so that you're not damned if you don't.
Right. Right, so I
as long
changed
as
that.
If you are doing it in a responsible way that protects the environment, then you are not faced with any permitting challenges because of that. You still have to obtain the permit, it's still going to be a tough one to get.
Make sure you tool us up with the right words, the right terms to use, so that we don't step on a sensitive part of our anatomy when we're trying to support it.
Fully appreciated. Yes, I think what we can provide you, we've already started working on it. We're just fine tuning it now. Some different pieces of engagement depending on who the audience is. So some maybe likely technical, others we keep it completely non-technical so that it's accessible for a wider audience.
Thank you.
Is that everything?
It is, oh, well, it's my little call for action here. that, please, I guess next meeting.
Yeah.
Please consider, resolution support.
I think,
that's what it's gonna be finalized next week, right?
Next
But it's been in process for a couple months.
Should be by the end of this week.
I don't think you'll find too much opposition to support for all your guys' efforts. Thank you very much for all your efforts. Brian, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just a little additional commentary. So revisions to the three basin rule, we think is gonna be critical, make or break to being able to permit. If not for construction, then for operation at least of the Mill City treatment, Mill City Gates treatment plant. But it does, if it's successful. And the petition as we've outlined it is successful getting adopted. Then it also creates that community sewer system. It makes it feasible for Detroit. So, you know, specifically, if DEQ does take up and put it out for public comment, that's going to be a huge opportunity for every community, for this board, to voice, provide input and the specifics about how significant that rule change would be if it's adopted. So that's the toolkit we're talking about for those responses. It could even be that the governor's staff reaches out to try to understand this more. So some of you that are, you know, city representatives may also be getting some questions directly from governor's staff. So that's when you use this information. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that if the three basin rule change that we're asking for is successful, we need to already be lobbying for money for Detroit for that commercial sewer system, sewage treatment system package, whatever, however we're going to phrase that, for the core and the center core system. We need to start that lobbying effort now, and it's going to be largely. I mean, we can push it, but this is the opportunity for Detroit to really step up and start making those calls for that money. So more to talk about on that. This is moves on.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, you're in the making, we're very excited about it.
Yeah, okay. Any further questions or comments for Chris? Anybody out there in Zoom have anything? See anything? Well, thank you very much for that update. There's a lot of information there. Certainly appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, this is an opportunity for agencies updates, DEQ, Business Oregon, Regional Solutions. Anybody have anything out there for updates? Mary, do you have anything for us?
Yeah,
from DEQ?
Arthur had to check out, so he didn't say anything, and Beth is out on vacation this week, so she doesn't have anything. Yes, I don't really have any updates. I just, I hear Danny loud and clearly about the septic systems, and from our perspective, there wasn't a change. We handle the pretreatment when it's not oil and grease. Just wasn't communicated. I know Brandon has a different opinion about that. And that's fine. We did meet Marion County DEQ, and Brandon met, especially on the Cedars property, to see if there was any options. And as I think Chris had really explained well, it's about, there's not enough acreage for that particular property to have that much flow. And so either you limit the flow, but if you do that, then they don't have the revenue. So it is definitely a difficult situation. And, everybody's is trying to do things within the rules, but see as much flexibility as we can have. So I feel bad because I know people want to move back and they thought they could just do repairs. And with older systems, that's why we ask that you do site evals and you take a look to confirm what's there and can it be repurposed. But I know that doesn't feel good to somebody who bought a piece of property thinking they could put a restaurant there and away they could go. So I just want to say that. And we have met and we will continue to meet and be available for a consultation as Brandon comes up with options. So just want to say that. And then for the three basin rule, probably within 2 weeks, we will, maybe 3 weeks at the latest, we will start our public process. That'll run for either 30 or 35 days. I'm not sure what we have to do on that one, but whatever it is, we will do that. And then when we're done with the comment period, DEQ will have to write a recommendation or report for the EQC. We will then present that to the EQC, and they will either, depending on what, what comes out of the, the comments, and also what our review says, they could recommend denial and then have you come back with another petition, or they could say it's fine and then direct us to go into rule writing. So you're changing the rule, but it hasn't officially been adopted. So after, if they accept the changes, then we have to officially go through the adoption process on that. And so that could take about 6 months to do that. So, I mean, we're preparing that if we're successful, that's what would happen. So just so you know, it's not like come, I think it's probably their end of October or early part of November is when when EQC would make a decision. And then about 6 months after that, if it's a positive decision in that respect, then we have to go adopt that rule change. So that's how that works. I don't think I have any other updates for the group.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mary. Does anybody have any questions for Mary? None at this time? All right, very good. That pretty much goes through our agenda. We had potentially an executive session, but that has been canceled, so we will not have an executive session tonight. So unless somebody else has something they would like to add to tonight's meeting, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everyone, for zooming in and driving in too.